Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. I am your host, Keith Crockford, and today I am chatting with Belinda Kirk. Hello, Belinda.
Hi, Keith. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you again. Now, obviously, we are doing this remotely, but as it stands now, you actually now only do live a couple of miles up the road from me now, down in Devon as well. But when I first got to know of you, you were based in Bristol, and my first sort of connection with you really was with Explorers Connect, which is what you sort of set up to bring together not necessarily just explorers, but adventurous people and bring them together. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, where it all started, and then go into a little bit of where did Explorers Connect come from?
Yeah, gosh, that's a long time ago. So I've basically been leading adventures for my whole career, and I love taking people out into the wilderness, and I'm really good at it. And I think it's great to find something that you love, and it's okay to be proud about that. It's the thing that I just love doing it. So I've done that for a long time in different ways. I've taken all sorts of different international expeditions, but I've also taken film crews, scientists, all sorts of different groups of people, different ages and abilities, on big international expeditions, but also on smaller adventures in Britain as well, or in Britain and Europe. And I've always been very passionate about how good they are for us. And for me, my life was changed by adventure. I'd say my life was saved by adventure and changed by adventure. And but we'll probably talk about that in a minute. And I've always wanted to encourage other people to find it and to make time for it, because it's such a great thing. So what I did, probably 15, 16 years ago now, was I set up Explorers Connect, because at the time there was just this was before sort of Facebook and Instagram really had much of a footing, and there was no before Meetup was existing as well. So those sorts of groups now, which are really handy for building communities, but there was nowhere to kind of meet other people that were like-minded. And so I set it up actually initially for expedition people to meet, because up until that point, expeditions had changed my life. I thought that you had to go on a big international expedition in order to find yourself and live your best life. I realized later that you can actually go on smaller ones, but I think we'll probably come to that as well. So I set up Explorers Connect because it was literally to connect an expedition community that was already there, but had no place to call home, I suppose. Over the years of running it, more and more people asked to meet, or can we do smaller, like, can we meet more regularly? Can we do more stuff? And the adventures started getting smaller and smaller. And we also run events like in lots of towns and cities around Britain. We had lots of meetups just in the evening, just to catch up. And what I realized personally and on that sort of and professionally was, these big expeditions were brilliant, but actually it can be quite on and off, because you're either on exped or on adventure, or if you're off. But if you find ways of doing it more often, then it's less like a once a year treat, and it's more like something you can fit into your lifestyle. And so Explorers Connect became much more about connecting people through smaller adventures as well as big adventures, because there is definitely a place for big adventures. But it was all about trying to connect. And the other real message of Explorers Connect is that adventuring, exploring, it's a very important part of being a human. It's a very important and essential part of our well-being and living our best lives. So, make time for it, celebrate it, and make time for it.
Yeah, definitely. I think, from our perspective, it's certainly, we've been chatting about this a lot at the Bucket List Company because, like you did, we've built over the last 6-7 years, we've built a community of people that have all met on trips, and they book other trips together now because, they might have joined their trip as a solo traveler, not knowing anyone. But of course, you go and spend those 2-3 weeks with a group of people who are all of a like mind. And the only thing really that's going to happen is you're going to become friends with them, because what other choice have you got? And one thing we've decided is to actually look at doing some like more localized meetups within the UK and, going around cities just to try and bring people back together again. Because like you said, when you've got these big trips, they're not cheap. They're not easy to kind of get the time off work for some people. So they are only going to do one of those a year. But actually the community is there. How do you keep that community going, isn't it?
Yeah, because you get such a buzz. You can, you're so on a high when you come back from a big expedition or trip, big adventure. But imagine if you can create, like, instead of these big peaks and troughs, you can create all these little hits of adventure in the middle. And I think the camaraderie is true as well, because from years of taking groups on these expeditions, just like you, years of leading teams, you can work with people for years in an office and have very cursory conversations. You don't really get under the surface, but you sit around a campfire together, you climb up a hill together, let alone a mountain, and you have different conversations. You bond in a very different way. And I think that's for lots of reasons. The camaraderie of having a shared goal, the fact that you're vulnerable together, and you have to trust. You build trust very quickly. These sort of chosen challenges are great ways of building community. And then, how disappointing to come back to Britain and then not be able to keep that magic alive. So I hope good luck with setting up some local things.
Well, yeah, and I think what one thing we think we really want to do is, I'll have a chat with you about this later, is actually bring in experts and people who have done this to actually, to make an evening of it, is to actually have a talk there. So people have a purpose of coming as well and listening and, being inspired by other people. That's kind of what we want to achieve with it. So we're certainly looking at doing that in the autumn period. So if you do listen to this podcast and, you maybe not been on one of our trips, then this could be a great chance of coming along and seeing what it's all about. So we're super excited about getting these done. Belinda, we kind of both started really in the same way. I mean, my first big overseas trip that I led, and most of my trips in the start of my career were delivering school expeditions for under 18s. And I think that has such a powerful, and COVID completely got in the way of that. And I think so many children have missed out on those opportunities before they go off into their work life or before they go to university. Like, do you feel like that is a great way to get youngsters into adventure, to start their life off on that path? Well,
on big international expeds, do you mean? Or
yeah, on your kind of 2, 3, 4 week expeditions, the sort that we both started leading. What the power in those? What how do you think the power in those is?
I think they're amazing. I mean, there are lots of organisations out there doing those sorts of expeditions now, youth development expeditions, I would call them. There's so many things to say. I mean, firstly, they're brilliant. I mean, they are life-changing. And I did one when I was 18, and it literally changed everything for me in a positive way. It just changed my route through life. So I'm a massive fan of them, and I'm actually, very, very as active as I can be, ambassador for British Exploration Society that does just that, as well as supporting the others, because there are brilliant other ones as well. But they are particularly brilliant, and I've done lots with them. But also, it's hard to find the resources for everyone to go on all of those sorts of trips, and sometimes we need maybe a stepping stone as well. And a stepping stone could be smaller adventures for young people, like Duke of Edinburgh, like Scouts, like, those sorts of things, or their school, or their, some other community group that could help them. Because it's really, I think it's really, really hard for some people to get onto those big expeditions, sort of 2, 3, 4 week expeditions, unless you know someone else who's done it. You've got like a role model, someone in your school has done it, or someone in your community has done it. It's a very big step. So I think we've got to make sure we're filling in the little steps as well. But but coming back to those big trips, I think what also I would say is that we have no rites of passage in our society. If you look at every other human civilization, pretty much, there is a way of signaling, but also honoring the growing up of a child to an adult. And through you're off to Tanzania soon. The Maasai used to hunt lion, or still, well, they don't now, but they would hunt lion. That would be part of their rites of passage. People would guys would jump off high. I'm trying to think where it was, in Papua New Guinea or somewhere. They'd jump off high platforms, like the first bungee jumps.
The timber structures, yeah.
Yeah, there's all sorts of extreme ones, but there's also there's this real joining of the hunting party, or going out and doing your first kill, or doing your first overnight or several days in the wilderness, within different tribes and so on, but also within other communities. So what we're missing out on, and I'm not saying we should go killing lions or anything, but what we're missing out on is a way to honor and signal children, adolescents becoming adults. And I think that we if you use the word adolescence, it's usually got quite a negative connotation, hasn't it? It's kind of like, oh, teenagers. But actually, teenagers are like everyone else. They're just as brilliant as everyone else. They've got just as many problems as everyone else, but they've got this enormous energy, and they're in this incredibly exciting, adventurous period of their physical and emotional development. And if we don't harness that in the right way, they go into adulthood without the support of the community, without the skills. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, because there's so much to say about rites of passage. But particularly those big youth development expeditions that you and I started on, they are the modern equivalent to our rites of passage that our ancestors had. And I think that's why they're so powerful.
Yeah, and I also think as well is it gives them that idea, because I've certainly noticed at the Bucket List Company that when I set it up, I never realized like the age demographic of what our standard customers would be. And actually it's a lot higher than I thought it was going to be. And it's these people who, because of, working the Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, having the families, they've got to later on in life. And now suddenly they've got the money, the time to then be able to go and do those adventures that they've wanted to do. But at the same time, we've had a lot of younger people who have come on to some of the trips, but their path was different at the start, because maybe they had done one of these expeditions beforehand and they've already got that buzz for adventure and they already know what it means, and they carry that on throughout their adulthood. Whereas what we tend to find with the majority of our clients is they've never had that before and they're finding it really late on in life.
Yeah. I think just a lot of our community just don't have access to outdoors, risk-taking, adventure. We've now got two generations. We've got of two generations of parenting whereby we've sort of shrunk our understanding of how much we let our kids develop. And what I mean by that is, I'm 48 now. So when I was a kid in the 70s, early 80s, the amount of area that I was free to roam in, compared to my son, who's 5, or well, maybe not compared to my son, but on a national, because I give him as much space as possible, but on nationally across Britain, the amount that people of my age were given to roam has shrunk by 90%. 90% compared to the kids nowadays. And now if you think about that, that's because the world is getting more indoors, it's becoming more screen-based, we're becoming more urbanized. There's all sorts of reasons for it. We've got way more traffic, and traffic is scary. So there's lots of sensible reasons, that we're not bad parents now. But society is set up in a way that people have less and less. We're so urbanized. We have less and less access to just being outdoors. And therefore, we have less and less access to all the benefits of being outdoors, including this idea of boundless nature, which is unpredictable and in which you will get cold and wet and hungry if you're not well planned, or even if you are well planned. And this kind of adversity and leaning into discomfort and leaning into risk and challenging ourselves to find out what we can do. It's just engineered out of our very structured, let's say, lives. And so I think we have, there's huge chunks of people of our society that don't get to try this stuff. And when they find it, and they can find it any time in life, they've then got to be able to, find the time, the money, and also they don't have the skill. They won't feel confident enough to do it on their own. So then the skills that they might have built up through scouts or through being a kid, they have to then try to find a way through. We're on the back foot now, so we've got to do as much as we can to help people get outdoors. Although, things are changing.
Would you say then that was one of your main reasons for moving from Bristol down onto Exmoor, was to give yourself that more space that was around you?
Oh, 100%. We had talked about moving to the country a lot, but especially somewhere wild. But I was abroad a lot, and so the emphasis wasn't on it. So I was working abroad an awful lot. Living in brilliant Bristol, which is my favourite city. It's such a great place to live, if you want to live in a city. But once we realised we were going to have a little one, we both just knew that we didn't want our son growing up in where we were living in the centre of Bristol, because he'd have no freedom. And we were lucky enough, because of our work and because we were willing to take a risk as well, that we had to get somewhere greener and wilder, and we had to prioritize that. And I know that that's very difficult. And I'm not sitting here thinking that everyone should just do that when they have a kid. You've got family, you've got support networks. You can't just up and leave. You've got, and a lot of people have got their jobs, their careers that are in a certain place. So it's not always that easy, and it's not easy. It wasn't easy for us. It's not easy for anyone to just up sticks and go somewhere where you know nobody. But for us, we just knew, well, that was the tipping point. We just wanted him to have a wild start in life. And I had a wild start in my life. And I think that's what I went back to in times of trouble. I was a feral kid when I was growing up, 7, 8 years old. I grew up on the island of Alderney in the Channel Islands. And I had several years out there of just being free. And I remember some great moments from that of autonomy and adventure and becoming an explorer, because life is about exploring. It's not just about getting on a plane, but, you know, just exploring the world and how it all fits together. And then we moved back. Well, my parents split up and we moved to Bristol, actually, and moved to a city. And I lost the wilderness and I lost the freedom. And things were tougher for a while, and because of lots of other reasons. But because I had that nature early on, I think it was something that I was able to go back to, something that called to me. I mean, I think maybe it calls everyone because it's such a natural part of being alive, is to this call to nature, call to adventure. But maybe because I was given that feral start, it was particularly strong, or at least I listened to that call. And so anyway, I really do think if you can the more we can give our kids outdoor time and freedom, then that's a great way to prepare them for the world.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on then, you've recently published a book, The Adventure Revolution. What made you want to write that book? And just talk us through, like, who should be reading this book? Who is this book for? What is the book about?
Yes. So for years, for about, where to begin? So I talked about how long I've been sort of leading teams in the wilderness. It's kind of nearing on 30 years I've been leading teams into the wilderness. And what I'd witnessed time and time again was this transformational power of chosen challenge in nature, or adventure. And this amazing effect that adventure had on people to help them prepare them for the other challenges in their lives, help them build relationships. We were talking about camaraderie and relationships earlier. Help them build confidence, help them build resilience. And I'd seen all this happen in front of my eyes for years. And I didn't know why we weren't discussing it. It wasn't something that was acknowledged, that adventure's good for us. It's like it's seen as a luxury, like something that only the really lucky people can do because they can afford it or find the time for it. And so I'd had this personally, I'd had a very difficult time as well. As I said, we had this, I had this quite idyllic chapter in my childhood when I was living on the Channel Islands, or at least the freedom I had there. But I also had, later in my childhood, I had a lot of, there was a lot of violence that I dealt with, which I won't go into for various reasons. But I was having to deal with episodes of violence within my childhood. And it left me very low in confidence, very low in self-esteem. And adventure, if we have time and if you want to talk about it, adventure saved me, basically. Finding Duke of Edinburgh Award and then going on my first youth development expedition, it changed my view of myself, of the world, and it completely transformed me. And then I've spent 30 years taking people on adventures, and I've seen it transform them. And I just like, why? How is this working? Why is no one talking about this? And how does this work? I think adventure makes you curious. I'd done a biology degree, so I kind of was reasonably happy looking at scientific papers because they're quite hard things to read. And I just started reading whatever I could find out there, books, research papers around psychology, around adventure, outdoor education, adventure education, positive psychology, evolutionary psychology, trying to piece together arguments and reasons as to why all the things I'd witnessed, why do they work like that? What's happening in our brain? What's happening with us in our psychology? Why is it adventure? I define it as chosen challenge. Why is choosing challenge? Why is that such a good thing for us? Anyway, I'd done 30 years of witnessing this. I've done now 10 years probably of researching this. And a few years ago, I talked about writing a book about it, or tried to get other people to write a book. I tried to find a book that explained to me, why is adventure good for us? And I couldn't find it. So because of COVID, I finally had all my overseas trips cancelled and so on, and had everything went into a standstill. And I thought, this is my chance to sit down and write this book. I've got I believe in it 100% because I've seen it my whole career. I've done years of research. I'd asked other people to write it, but they didn't want to. And I thought, I'm just going to sit down and grapple with it and write the book that I wish I'd had 20 years ago. And so I've written the book. It's called Adventure Revolution, The Life-Changing Power of Choosing Challenge. It's the first book that explains the psychology of why adventure is so good for us. And yeah, I mean, I wrote it because I think we have a wonderful opportunity that we're not using. Adventure is seen as this luxurious, frivolous thing, but actually taking on adventures, choosing adventures, is something that is really, really good for us. It builds us up in all those ways that I've mentioned. And I think it's because we're facing a mental health epidemic at the moment, a crisis. Our society, let's face it, the way we've gotten to, however we got there, there's lots of reasons why we are where we are, but we have the worst mental health crisis we've ever faced, and we need innovative tools. We need different tools. We need to think outside the box, basically. And I think adventure in schools, adventure in our trying to find adventure and engineer adventure into our lifestyles, adventure in urban planning. I imagine if there was climbing, bouldering walls up every municipal building. There's ways that if we engineered more adventure into our lives, I think we would find ways to heal, find ways to build ourselves up and live our best lives. So I mean, the book's really for everyone. It's for people who already love adventure and have been wondering why they love it so much, or if they found it transformative or good for them. It's also, lots of people have bought it and got in touch. Lots of grandparents have given it to their kids, to their children, and their grandchildren. People have given it to friends who have been going through tough times, and it's like, hey, you've been talking about an adventure. Maybe this is worth taking the time and money to go to, climb Kilimanjaro or climb Snowdon or try camping in your garden for the first time. I mean, literally, the level of adventuring doesn't really matter because it's all individual. It's all important. So yeah, I just really think that this message should be out. We should be looking at adventure in a different way, and we should be valuing it. And I think that would help the adventure industry as well, because let's face it, most people who work in the adventure industry, they're not paid properly. They're not valued for what they do in the way that they should be. And it might help rejuvenate and make more adventure more accessible for more people by valuing the industry better.
Yeah, I think you're right there when it comes to the industry. It's the industry is a numbers game, isn't it? Like, the more people who are doing it, the more money that's coming into it. Like, at the minute, it is still, quite a niche market. I mean, when I set up this climbing wall here, there were very few climbing walls around the country. There were 3 south of Bristol. Like, I remember when I first started climbing in 97, the only climbing wall we had access to was Undercover Rock in Bristol, and we had to drive from Plymouth to Bristol if it was raining to go climbing. Now it doesn't really matter now where you are. You're a very short distance away from a climbing wall. But I also think as well, like you just said there, like, what is adventurous for one person is not necessarily that adventurous for another. And, you know, I loved camping out during lockdown in my garden with the kids, just so they actually felt they were doing something different. And it was, you know, we cooked marshmallows on the barbecue and we did all that. And for them, that was really exciting. And, you know, they were very small then at the time. But for other people, you know, they might want to go, well, let's go wild camping on Dartmoor. And luckily now, when we're recording this podcast, we can now go wild camping back on Dartmoor again. I know you were a massive advocate in that and got very involved. And for those who, you know, Dartmoor is one of our national parks in the UK. It's very close to where both Belinda and I live. And the majority of it is owned by local farmers who had gone to the High Court and basically got it so that we could no longer wild camp on Dartmoor. And actually there was a great fight by the local people, and that got overturned in the end, didn't it? And we're allowed to wild camp on Dartmoor again.
Yeah, it was it's all just happened in the last few weeks, couple of
10
weeks.
days, yeah.
The appeal won, and we've got our rights back essentially. But isn't it crazy that we're living in a world, again, it's our society's gone so off track. We were just about on the verge of losing even more access to a little bit of nature. You know, if on Dartmoor, there's something called the 10 tours, which you know, but it's essentially when lots of groups of kids can go and hike and camp on Dartmoor. And, you know, this change in the law would have eventually probably led to the end of that. And the idea that, you know, all these children and families and young people and old people and everyone, that, you know, the one last place in England that you can camp, just freely camp in the wild, was about to be taken away. When we have the worst mental health crisis ever, where we know that nature is good for us, and we actually now know that adventure is good for us, because there's bags of evidence, not just in my book, but since then I do a lot of work with researchers to try and get more and more commission. There's a tidal wave of research at the moment around adventure and well-being. Tidal wave may be a bit strong, but yeah, there's a lot more research since my book and since my other campaigning work. So it's just crazy that we could even, thankfully anyway, it didn't happen, and thankfully we've reversed that and got our rights back. And it might even lead to further rights. It might expand our chance to wild camp, but I'm not holding my breath on that one.
No, but I will. But I also think as well, though, that as a human race in the UK, there are a minority of people who are living that adventurous lifestyle, but there are also a lot of other people who are then spoiling that for others. And that was part of the argument of the landowners, wasn't it? It wasn't just about, you know, we're taking this access away for you. I mean, you know, if you go down onto Dartmoor, down by one of the rivers, you will see disposable barbecues everywhere. You'll see rubbish everywhere. You'll see beer bottles everywhere in the most stunning place. You know, I love Dartmoor and it is absolutely stunning. If you go onto, you know, we could go from where we live, we could go 20 minutes in the other direction and be on a beach with plastic thrown everywhere and beer bottles. You know, that I can kind of, in some respects, we need to educate the whole population on the importance of this so everybody comes to respect it, because at the minute there are a minority, like our minority, that I think are spoiling it for everybody else as well.
Yeah, and that's true, but that's literally because we've gotten to where we've gotten, where we're generations into a society now that don't know how to go outdoors. The answer is not stop people going outdoors. The answer is educate people to do it better. That's it. And there is going to be a difficult transition bit. There's going to be some of that transitional problem where people are going to leave litter and so on. But the answer is definitely not stop them going out. The answer is educate them earlier, actually. I mean, I've done a lot of had a lot of chats and done a bit of talked to some of the really leading researchers around this who are doing, trying to work out how after COVID, lots of people went outdoors, which is what we wanted, but we hadn't given them the information and the education to be safe, to be to keep and to respect the land. And we were trying to do it when they got to Snowdon and there was a queue of traffic, if you remember those sorts of scenes. We need to do it much earlier, was what's come back from the feedback from that research and that learning. We've had, there's teething trouble, but we just need to do it in schools. We need to do it in, at companies like yours. We need to do it in the outdoor shops. There needs to be, there just needs to be support, I think. But you're right. There's a minority of people acting like idiots, and we need to stop that happening. Some of them are being just selfish, but most of them, I think, if they were just given the right information, they would actually. They don't want to. They didn't realise they're not supposed to leave their rubbish. It's like, where's the bin? Or we'll just leave it in a pile, the other pile of rubbish. There's a lot of people who I think just need a bit of guidance.
But this goes back to, like, if for us, like, when we put posts up about, Everest base camp treks, everyone always says, oh, it's disgusting, it's dirty, it's this, it's that. And it used to be disgusting and dirty. But actually what's now happened is, the locals have been educated that you don't burn plastic outside your front door anymore. Like, that can be recycled. These things can happen. Like, they've put things in. Granted, the mountain is still a bit of a mess when people are on it. They're still having to work on that. But it just goes back to that whole thing of, this is what we've always done. And because of tourism, the Nepalese have, they've been educated into, people don't want to walk past your house full of rubbish by your front door. It needs to be clean and tidy. If you want to sell rooms in your tea house, it needs to look nice. But, for them, it was always a case of this whole thing of, well, that's what we've always done. And I think kind of at the minute, like you said, we're 2 generations in now where that's becoming the norm for some people as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we just have to respect that that we need to get people outdoors. We need to, we have a climate and a pollution and a environmental, every kind of level, deforestation, everything else, biodiversity loss. We have a whole suite of environmental crises on our hands. And that is primarily because we don't have any relationship as a human race with nature. We've broken that relationship. And so we therefore have to find ways of helping people to get outdoors and to, have adventures and be in nature. But, there are, sometimes there are sacrificial areas, I suppose you could put it, honeypots, where you're going to have a lot of, wearing down of footpaths and stuff like that. And you think, well, actually, if we do that, will we protect the whole rest of the park by having these honeypot areas? But that raises the money to protect the rest of. There's lots of complex things, but I think you and I are saying the same thing. I think, we have a problem. We have, and we need to face it, but we don't want to just hide from it and stop people going out. That isn't the answer, because that's kind of what's caused the problem in the first place. We now have to grasp the nettle and get on with it. And we need to think about the well-being of our communities and the well-being of the planet together. And that means working together, getting out there and trying. Trial and error. Yeah. Adventure teaches you trial and error.
Probably we are on this podcast. We are probably preaching to the wrong people, because they're probably already converted if they're listening to this podcast anyway. But in terms of, we're recording this podcast on a Saturday morning. I'm actually in the climbing centre recording this, and I've got like 18 children downstairs on their Saturday morning climbing club now. those children are experiencing something. Next weekend, they're all off outdoors climbing with us, and we're going to take them out. They've done their indoor climbing, that we've got them feeling confident at that. And then next week they're going off, up to Valley of the Rocks for a day out of outdoor climbing. And it's just taking those little baby steps in. You probably find that their parents brought them in once for a taster session in a climbing center. They enjoyed it. They then joined our kids club. They then, excuse me, now they are progressing in the climbing world. And they've just had that little bit of push from the parents in terms of do you want to do this? They're being supported by their parents. And I think, we've got like 80 children in our youth club now. And bearing in mind, we are a small climbing ward in North Devon. We're not in a major city anywhere, and that's growing all the time, which is amazing. If we could bring children in from a young age to do that, what are they going to be doing when they're later on in life? I know three of our youth group from a couple of years ago have been and just done the outdoor course at college because they got into climbing, really loved it, and then went on to do that as their next step. And I think it's just by giving young people those opportunities, it might set them off on a completely different path. Because I know that's what happened to me. I was born in Plymouth. I was brought up in Plymouth. I had the sea on one side of me. I had Dartmoor on the other side of me. I was very lucky that my grandparents were very outdoorsy people, walking on Dartmoor, going to the beach. My nan taught me to surf. It was, my upbringing was very special in terms of how it, made my path for my life, really. And I just think that the more we can do that for our children, the better. The more we can camp with them in the garden, the more, we can take them, for my kids, our family holidays always used to be 2 weeks camping in France, and we used to tour around France, and we had the bikes and everything else. Well, they got an awful lot out of those holidays because, like you say, they had the freedom. They were on a campsite. They were cycling around the whole time. We would go out. There was a river. They'd go and swim in the river. They'd go paddleboarding. They'd go kayaking. My kids have been fortunate enough. Obviously, we own an adventure centre, so they've been very lucky in terms of they've had it all on their doorstep. And now they're not really pushing back from it, but I don't want to be that person that's making them do it all the time. I want them to want to do it. But they just absolutely love it. But I think now they've got that option to pick and choose. That's really special for them. The other day, my son's football team came up on the high ropes course for their end of season football party. Well, it was a little bit unfortunate for my son, really, because he's done it all before. Unfortunately, my daughter had her school residential here at the adventure centre. So she kind of I'm having my school residential at home. It's kind of not the same for everybody else. But, she still got loads out of it. We didn't let her in the house for the week. She wasn't allowed in the house. She had to stay with her friends and, do all that. But those opportunities, I think, those residential opportunities for children at school, like you say, the expeditions later on in life, I think just sets people's paths on which direction they're going to go in. And if, like you say, just stretching people into that risk zone a little bit, we just need to push people so actually they do feel a little bit scared. They're not just constantly in their comfort zone. They are being pushed that little bit. And I think that really does build people.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, yeah, I agree completely. That's what I've written 250 odd pages about because I think there's so much that you get from adventuring, but particularly when it comes to kids. And you were talking about finding a path in life, even if it doesn't lead to a career. Because for you and me, it led to our careers, but it's obviously not going to lead to a career for most of these kids. But what it will give them is these skills for life and the confidence, incredibly important skills like confidence and autonomy, so that they can go and find what it is that they do want to do in their life and be brave enough to try it and to be resilient enough to pick themselves up when they failed, because you can't do anything good without failing along the way. And to build also to build to build skills for the rest of their lives, for their relationships and so on. And so, I mean, if only all kids could have access to your youth club or youth clubs like it. I know my son's going to come there. I'm sure at some point. I've taken him climbing at your climbing wall before. He's enjoyed it. He's very into parkour at the moment and dancing and gymnastics. But I think I'll keep giving him the opportunity for the climbing, and I imagine he'll get well into that at some point. Oh yeah, and mountain biking is his other thing at the minute.
Give children the opportunity, I think, to try everything. I remember, when mine were little, they were out doing different clubs every night, and then they try a new one and drop another one, and it's just letting them find out what it is that they love to do, and it's just being able to give them those opportunities to be able to do that. But then likewise for adults, if you're sat there going, actually, I've never tried rock climbing, go down to your local, find out where your local climbing wall is, go down and do an induction course at the climbing wall. We've got, there's a climbing club that meet at ours every Wednesday, and most of those people are members who have turned up. They've enjoyed climbing, but they've then got nobody to climb with. They found this one thing that they really like doing, but nobody else they know actually does it. And there are plenty of groups around, whether you like mountain biking, whether you like trekking, whether you like climbing, whether it's kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding. There's all these opportunities out there for people. But, sometimes you just need to make that first step and go and do it and put yourself into there and then find where to go and do it afterwards, in terms of, let me find a group that allows me to carry on doing this. Belinda, thanks ever so much for coming on to the podcast today. It's been really interesting to chat with you. I really enjoyed your book. I'll put a link to the book in the show notes. So if anyone wants to go and find a copy of Adventure Revolution, they can go and get a copy. Belinda, one thing we always ask new people who come onto the podcast is, what is on Belinda Kirk's bucket list?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, do you know what? At the moment, I'd like to write another book. Maybe not the bucket list you were thinking of.
Everyone can have a bucket list. It doesn't need to all be travel orientated.
Yeah. So I enjoyed the process of writing, but I found it incredibly hard. But having done it once, and it's going to be several years before. I'm not going to be someone who's like churning out a book every year, because I'm not that passionate about enough things. But I really think there's more to be said about kids and well-being and adventure. I think also I don't know. So I won't get into it now, but I would like to do some more writing, because I think the power of sharing ideas and share, it's such an honor for people to read my book and for it to affect them and to help them. And so I've had wonderful emails from that. And I kind of think, this is a powerful tool. And if I can write something else that is useful, then I'm going to write something else useful, or just write something for my son is the other idea that I've got. As far as adventuring, John, we're just trying to find ways of having adventure that fits in with having a family. And all sorts of things have thrown up that I wasn't expecting. Like my son he's 5, but he's so attached to his friends. He loves his mates that if we go away for too long, he misses them. So I thought we'd be traveling the world, doing big adventures and, disappearing for 6 months and stuff. He doesn't want to go away for that long. So we're looking into ways of how to do adventures that we all are getting what we want from them, and we're all bonding as a family. Also sustainable adventures. So we're looking at how to no-fly adventures is another big bucket list thing that we're looking at actually at the minute. Because as a parent, I kind of I wonder how, as a role model as well, how we can have all the benefits of adventuring, have all the fun, and also do it in a way that is without so many flights, I guess, or that we can go somewhere and do something positive together, so that what we're sort of not carbon offsetting, but it makes more. I don't know. I'm blathering now at the end. I wasn't expecting that. You probably warned me that question was coming, and I wasn't expecting it. Do you know what I'm at my age? I've realised I've done so much stuff on my bucket list, and it's great to have a bucket list. But right now, I'm just enjoying being a mum, and I enjoy getting the message out about Adventure for Wellbeing. And it's just about being a bit more. So my bucket list is much longer in some ways, but also it's much less of a focus. So anyway, that's a really random end.
No. Belinda, where can people find out more about you? Where's the best place to follow you on? Well,
Explorers Connect, there's lots of free resources, and you can find cool teammates to do cool adventures, unique one-off adventures that people set up all over around the world, as mates. Explorersconnect.com. You can find me on Instagram, Explorer Belinda, and on Twitter, or whatever it's called now, X, as long as that's around. And just drop me an email through Explorers Connect if you want any advice or find out more about Adventure for Wellbeing, particularly. I also run a conference called Adventure Mind, and a research network, which is all around Adventure for Wellbeing. So if you're a professional or you just want to know more, if you're an outdoor leader or a therapist and you want to involve adventure in therapeutic work or understand more about counselling, if you're an outdoor leader, anything like that, then look up Adventure Mind, come to the conference, drop me an email. Very keen to see this Adventure for Wellbeing grow.
Perfect. And you were there at the National Outdoor Show last year, as we were, and you will be there again next year as well, speaking on this. So anybody that's listening that's going to come and see the Bucket List Company at the show, you can also come and see Belinda as well. Belinda, again, thank you very much. It's been super interesting to chat with you. Hope you've enjoyed it, everyone, as much as I have. I am flying off to Tanzania next week. So there'll be an exciting podcast coming soon all about safari. So if you've got a safari on your mind and on your bucket list, I will be covering that off in a couple of weeks' time. But until next week, I'll speak to you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.